Okay, and we're recording. All right. So this is what we've got on the docket. Was anybody involved in my town hall a week or so ago? No? All right, good. Then I'll kind of go back through the same basic stuff we talked about, plus a little more. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's start out with a little bit of an update on the ARRL. Now, many of you probably know that there have been some key jobs open at headquarters for quite a while, right? Well, there's some good news there. We're getting some of the key ones filled. And I've had a chance to spend time with David Minster and with all the new folks, and I can tell you that we're making some excellent hires. Have any of you encountered Mike Walters yet? Mike is facing the field service team and clubs. And he's been on board, I think, since earlier last year. So he's been at it a while. Most recently, Steve Goodgame has joined. Steve is working on the training and lifelong learning side of the league. He's very interested in bringing social media, YouTube, and some of the kinds of things that might be good for newer or younger hams to get involved. And he's got a lot of plans, and the poor guy's working like 24/7 on them, so he's pretty jazzed. And then most recently, we brought Josh Johnston on to run emergency communications, ARRL, NTS, RACES, all the kinds of things that the league does in that area. And Josh is in kind of a listening mode right now. He's trying to talk to as many people as he can to try to understand what the state of emergency communications is and what people think it should look like going forward before he begins to do anything. The last key position that's being worked on is a director of IT. Many of you probably have concerns about the website, Logbook of the World, awards, all kinds of other stuff. I've been hearing that everywhere I go. That hire will be a key one in order to unlock a lot of those problems. And I think where we're headed is to look for somebody who is a good application specialist for that job first. If you think about how people do this kind of stuff nowadays, it's likely to be that we won't have a data center in Newington in some amount of time. And a lot of things will be done on things like Amazon and the cloud. And so what we're particularly looking for is someone that has that type of experience. All right, let's talk a little bit about operating. You all probably saw that there were a couple surveys done recently. Did anybody respond to the field day survey? Anybody get that or do that one? Or the VHF contest survey? Anybody do either of those? Okay, so those were two surveys that the folks that are involved in contesting and DXing activities recently ran to get some input. As a result, Field Day 2022 will continue to be in the same sort of mixed format that we've done the last couple of years due to COVID. You'll be able to operate from home stations. The power will be limited to a maximum of 100 watts, period. One of the problems that occurred with the home station thing, at least the first time we did it, is that a lot of folks ran beams and amplifiers that pretty much wiped everybody else out from their home stations, which obviously wasn't what Field Day was about. So there will be the 100 watt power limit, and the ARRL has changed all of its contesting and field day down from 150 watt limit to kind of that medium power category down to 100 watts. And I guess technically that's called the low power category, although honestly I don't think 100 watts is really low power. I guess if you're used to using amplifiers, maybe it is. But home stations will be allowed, and that survey also included questions about whether that home station category should be made permanent. In other words, that be a standing thing that you can do in field day going forward. I don't think that decision has been made yet, but I'm sure there will be another field day survey after this year's field day, and if you all have strong opinions on how that should go one way or another, you might want to pay attention to that. The VHF contest survey was a lot about the impact of FT8. Is anybody in here a VHF contester? Anybody do June VHF bitches, right? And there's a lot of concern that because FT8 works quite well on 6 meters and above, it's kind of taken over those contests. There's not as much CW and sideband activity as there once was, and folks are really, really concerned about that. So what the VHF survey was about was I think that went out, at least initially, to all the people who had submitted logs in ARRL VHF contests over the last couple of years, is to get some input on what people want to do about that. So more to come on that one. Also, there's a new digital contest that's just been announced. How many of you do ARRL RIDI Roundup, or those contests? A few people do. And how many people like the fact that FT8's in there? How many people wish that FT8 wasn't in there? Yep, there you go. So you got your wish, okay? What's happening is the league has created a separate contest that's specifically for FT8 and PSK, and the RIDI Roundup's going to go back to a pure RIDI contest. So that was one of the things that kind of came out of some of the survey work that we've been doing, and that's been getting cleaned up. All right, another thing that's really hot on the agenda right now is how many are familiar with the fees that the Forest Service is getting ready to charge or proposing to charge? I think I lost my audio. Did I push the wrong button here or something? All right, I'm going to talk really loud and hopefully you all can hear me. The Forest Service, as a result of some language that was in the Farm Bill, of all things, thank you, Mitch, that's great. Some language that was in the Farm Bill decided that it was okay to start charging additional usage fees. And the numbers we're hearing are like $1,400 to have a repeater site a year on public land. That's Forest Service. And obviously that's not good for amateur radio. David Seidel, who's our FCC and federal counsel, has already responded quite strongly in dissent of that. And there is a comment period where you all can respond and let folks know your displeasure with for folks having to pay a fee to provide basically communication services, including in emergencies on public land. I'm going to be dropping that comment interval is going to open up again on Tuesday, on March 1st. And I'm going to be dropping an email to the division list, which I'll tell you a little bit later, or Phil will, how to get on. That will give you a link where you can go in and comment and let folks know that you amateur radio folks really are not pleased about having our pockets picked so that we can provide public service on public land. That's not appropriate, okay? So watch out for that. A few things with the board, and I'm going to kind of sum up. I don't think folks have heard an update from anybody in my chair for a while, so I'm going to kind of cover the last two board meetings. In July, a new standing committee for emergency communications and field services was created specifically to get a stronger focus on those two areas. So what is this? Well, I think we all know what emergency communications, that's ARRS, NTS, RACES, Skywarn, those kinds of things. What's field services? Field services is basically the volunteer part of the ARRL that faces all of you through your section manager. And particularly, there's a lot of concern that we are not paying enough attention to supporting clubs. That's a big part of what this committee is all about, okay? So that role, along with the appointments of Mike Walters and Josh Johnston, really set up an environment in the league where all the right things are in place to get our emergency communication strategy and training programs up to date, to work on relationships with the agencies we serve, and also to provide better support for clubs. And one of the things that's related to that is there are some grant programs that are available for clubs who want to basically engage in mentoring, training, emergency communications, and other things. There's one program right now that the ARRL Foundation has been doing, and I'm happy to report that we've just received $500,000 from ARDC that the foundation is charged to dispense to clubs basically this year. So watch for some more information to come out on how you can get at some of that money if you have some projects in mind. All right, youth licensing. We know the FCC is getting ready to charge us quite a good chunk of money. I think it's $35 for licenses when we get them or upgrade them. One of the things that was done at the July board meeting was to put a program in place so that if you're a young person and you're getting your first license, the league will cover those fees for you, as well as give you a $5 kind of give back on your VEC fee to try to take the edge off for new licensees. So that was pretty positive development, I think. How many of you are aware of the 70+ lifetime membership program? Anybody know about that one? Back in last year, the league created a discount for folks who were over 70 years of age who wanted to become life members to make it a little bit more accessible. The initial program required you to have 25 years of membership in the league to qualify, which of course made it a non-starter for a lot of people. I'm happy to report that in the January board meeting that requirement was removed. So now if you're 70 plus and you want to be a life member, you can get a discount. And we've directed the folks at headquarters to allow the fee for that lifetime membership to be paid in installments, so that it's not such a big shock for folks on a budget if they want to do that. So again, pretty positive development, I think. Let's see. Some internal stuff. The ARRL has long had its investments managed by the treasurer, and Rick Niswander, who's done that job and done it well for many years, has always taken care of that. Folks decided that it would be a good idea to have an external investment manager take some of that work over. And so we've been going through a process and have selected an external investment manager and set up an oversight group to basically do a little better job of managing our endowments and our funds going forward. And then lastly, as we do at the beginning of the year, we had elections for ARRL officers, president, first and second VP, treasurer, and so on. Pretty much the folks that were in those positions, Rick Roderick, Mike Raisbeck, who's here in New England as first VP, kept their jobs. Rick Niswander has decided that he wanted to retire, which kind of is wrapped up in that whole investment thing that I just talked about. And we went through an interview process and selected a new treasurer, John Sager, who has quite a bit of experience running investments for nonprofit organizations. I think he's an excellent pick. So he'll be coming on and doing a transition with Rick. So looking ahead, a few things going on. There's something called the Clear Signal Initiative that the folks in one of the board committees have been working on with a whole group of people. What this is about is getting signals that transmit signals on the air to be cleaner. Okay, and there's kind of two parts to it. One is to set standards for manufacturers and measure, like when we test transmitters in QST, how clean the signals are, whether they are constrained well to the bandwidth that they're supposed to be in, how much noise they create on the bands. If any of you ever been on 40 meters during a sideband contest, you know what noise on the band is all about from transmitters that are not that clean. And there's also a component to that initiative that will be about providing training for hams who, for example, are doing digital stuff or using amplifiers so they can learn how to adjust their equipment properly so they have good, strong, clean, narrowband width signals. Okay. I talked about the MCOM stuff going forward. I talked about the club grant program. A lot of concerns about progress in the FCC. So here's the deal on the FCC. We've kind of been in sort of a perfect storm situation. COVID hit, which kind of shut the FCC down. A lot of ways people have not been going into their offices. On top of it, the FCC decided to move its headquarters, so the people that wanted to go in the office had no office to go into for a while. And then we were without a chairperson for the FCC, which made it really hard to get anything other than, kind of straight line licensing stuff to go forward. Those issues are pretty much being resolved, and David Seidel, who is our former FCC member and our counsel in DC, is telling us that we should begin to see some progress with some of our initiatives at the FCC again. A couple things that are important there. There are some important licensing changes to give technician licensees more privileges on the HF bands. We're hoping to see that move forward. That's, from my perspective, that's a very important thing to get done. I've been pretty heavily involved in licensing people. I've licensed or upgraded over 400 people through classes in the last 5 years. And I can tell you without a doubt that one of the #1 reasons that only about 25% of those techs will actually ever get on the air is because of a lack of meaningful HF privileges, which is what most of them really are interested in doing. And so if we can get that work done at the FCC, I expect we will see a lot more activity from people who are already licensed getting actively involved in amateur radio. So that's pretty important. And then lastly, on the legislative front, I know I'm in Vermont here, but here's a some data and a warning for you. In New Hampshire, we just recently had a bill come up in a realm of protection from 5G cellular radiation. And what we saw in that bill was it would have done two things. It would have banned all new antennas in residential areas, actually within 1,600 feet of any place zoned residential, no matter what they were. And on top of it, it would have required the state of New Hampshire to create a registry where if you thought you were having some impact from RF, you could point at an antenna you could see and say, that's the thing that's causing my health problem, put that person in a public registry, if you were in a residential area. Now imagine what that would do to amateur radio. We scrambled a whole bunch of hams to testify in front of a committee hearing that took place a couple weeks ago, and we got the bill basically sent back for rework. Now that doesn't mean it's dead, but it does mean that we now have the time to create an appropriate amateur radio carve-out and make sure that if that bill does ever see the light of day, that it doesn't harm us. Now, why am I talking about that here in Vermont? We believe that these types of legislation are going to appear all over the place. There are a lot of people who believe that 5G cellular, because of particularly the tendency to have higher frequency cells with very shorter radiation patterns and therefore need to be placed all over the place to deploy 5G, are going to pretty much end life on Earth. Okay, now obviously that's not rational. You all, if you were in Ed Hare's talk earlier and heard the MPE discussion, heard it talking about that there's probably no good scientific basis to worry about this, but we're going to need to be vigilant. One of the things that I'm in the process of doing, I'm going to bring all the section managers and state government liaisons together in the division to share what happened in New Hampshire and kind of put people on alert and make sure that we're doing a good job of communicating to the folks at headquarters on what's going on here, and that we have help for ham radio carve-outs if we keep seeing these things come up. I personally think that at a state level in the United States and certainly in New England, this is probably going to be our biggest challenge going forward, at least in the near term. All right, how are we doing on time? Let me stop and take a couple questions before I talk about some of the internal stuff we're doing. Does anybody have any questions on any of that material? Yeah.
Is the field day home station, that was allowed before, but is the difference now they can work other home stations? Is that what the difference is?
Yeah, Paul, good question. The question was, in case you didn't hear it, what's the difference with the field day home stations? Well, for the last couple of years, home stations, because of COVID, have been allowed to work other home stations. We've always had the ability to have home stations at field day, but because so many people couldn't safely go out and be part of a public field day, the rules were relaxed to allow home stations to work each other. What's being done in 2022 is continuing that, but also in addition reinforcing the 100-watt power limit. So if you're at home with stacked beams, you can't turn your 1,500-watt amplifier on and basically blow everybody else away. That's not what field day is about. But yes, you will be able to, home stations will be able to work other home stations. Any other questions? Yeah, in the back.
Hey, Josh, I'm just curious about how much more HF bandwidth you're talking about for the technicians. And my second question is, it sounds like what that law would do is kind of like in Texas, that anyone could just go around and point to an antenna and say, you're the reason.
Yeah, so let me take the second one first, and I'll come back and answer your one about the bandwidth and the tech. So for those who didn't hear it, the question that, the second question was asked is that law in New Hampshire that I talked about, HB 1644. Yeah, there was no requirement in there for any medical basis or anything science-based. Literally, if I woke up one morning and I had an ache in my arm and I was pretty convinced that the ham radio antenna down the street that I could see was the reason that I was getting radiated and causing my problem, I could put that ham's address and that antenna location in the public register for everybody to see. And obviously that's ripe for abuse and not science-based, which is one of the reasons that we work so hard to kill it. Relative to the technician enhancement, I don't have all this in front of me, but basically what it would do is it would give techs more meaningful sideband and digital privileges. It doesn't change any of the band allocations per se. So where sideband is where sideband is. Where digital is would stay the same. What it would do, and I'm struggling with memory here, I think it would give them privileges on 15, 40, and 80, not on 20 if I remember correctly. And it would also give them, in addition to sideband, it would give them digital privileges. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Like
I have the chart in front of me if you'd like me to read some frequencies off.
Hold on a second, we'll see if I answered the question well enough or not.
If you have
Okay.
time, it'd be nice, but if you don't have time.
Yeah, let me come back and we'll try and do that at the end if we have time. I just want to make sure, because I bet there's a lot of stuff to cover. Any other questions on the ARRL update? Yeah.
My thought is that if they do this privilege needs to be very, very done. Give them a sample of different bands, make it very limited, otherwise there's no incentive for them to upgrade.
Yeah, yeah.
Let them get some equipment on there and they say, geez, I could bad more bandwidth, I could work more, because the DX is down there and I can't get there, whatever.
Yep, yep.
So give a very small taste.
Yep, that's pretty much what the question was, for those who didn't hear it, was the suggestion that the privileges need to be limited, otherwise there'd be no motivation to upgrade.
Yeah.
Definitely true. What we can actually look at this if we have time at the end and see what the proposal is. But for example, some of the very best stuff like activity on 20 meters and so on is not there. So there'll be plenty, even if this thing gets passed, there'll be plenty of incentive to upgrade. The idea is that we want to see the technician have motivation to build an HF station and enjoy long distance communications right out of the chute. And what I can tell you from my own experience with licensing folks, so those 400 people that I've been involved teaching classes to and upgrading, half of those were techs. Another 3/4 of those went right on to general, and then a small percentage, like 10%, go to extra. Okay, so giving those younger or newer hands, not necessarily younger hands, a taste of HF actually usually motivates them pretty strongly to get on to general. So providing those privileges, I think, will have the intended effect, at least from what I've seen. One or two more questions, and I want to do a little bit more, and then we'll come back and do more questions at the end as time permits. Anybody else? Anybody online? Okay. All right. Let's talk about what we've been doing here in the division. Okay. So some of you probably know that when I ran for this job, I kind of had a vision that said, you know what the board does and what the league does is really important. That's kind of all that's in my job description technically. You know, if I just wanted to check the box, I'd show up for 2 board meetings a year and write a report, and I would do everything that the league claims that I need to do as a director. And we've had directors who don't really do much more than that. I've always believed that this role, the most important part of it is the opportunity to get people in the division to work together and solve problems, okay? And so one of the things that I committed to do is to appoint 4 assistant directors, 3 at least of which, maybe 4 of them are on here, to work on some important areas. And what this role is, it's intended to have people who will bring folks together who are already successful with things like mentoring and new ham development, mitigating RF issues, doing emergency communications, work in schools, and so on, and make sure there's a forum for people who are doing good work to share that with other people who want to try to do those things, that we're doing a good job of publicizing things, and to the extent that we build some programs that are across the division, to make it my job to take those programs in and get them made ARRL national level programs. That's the vision behind doing the assistant directors, okay? And you know, a lot of the success of this will be up to all of you to engage with these people, share what is working, benefit from the things that other people that are doing, and hopefully work together to create some national level programs. So I'm not going to go through in too much detail on this, but let me just give you one example. Rob Lydon, who's on here, on our Zoom, is in charge of what we call spectrum protection and use. So what's our vision for that? Rob is working with Ed Hare and some folks in the Southern Division to set up a specific process so that if you have an RFI problem, which somebody in Ed's session was talking about, I heard it earlier today as an example, you have a process you can follow to figure out if it's in your home and resolve it, to start the process if it's not your home and figuring out where it is. Our idea is that there will be teams of people in New England with equipment that you can ultimately bring to your site to help you track it down. And once the source is isolated, some tools for you to help resolve it, including work that Ed Hare and the lab can do to do things like write letters or get the FCC involved. So the idea is for Rob to create a coherent process that any of us who are having RFI problems, interference problems, can use. Get a result. Now, how many people currently have an RFI or interference problem at their station, noise that they're wrestling with? Raise your hand. Anybody have any of those? Mitch does. Probably a lot of us do. Okay? So this is an example of the kinds of stuff that's facing towards our division that we've created the assistant director positions to work on. And we've already got the lab at headquarters and some of the board committees involved. And quite frankly, there's a strong interest if we get this to work here in New England well to make it a national level program. So that in a nutshell is what we're trying to do here. Okay? All right. I'm not going to go through all of these now. If you all are interested in these assistant director positions, I'll provide this package to you if you could post it. We also did a town hall where all these folks talked in quite a bit of detail about what they're trying to do and how you can get involved to work with them on some of these issues. So what are the 4 areas? You heard about Rob with spectrum protection and use. Corey Golub is working on emergency communications related public service related activities. He's got a large group of people that are trying to get together to do things like work on training across New England, work on projects to get new people involved in emergency communications to try to get some new hands more involved in that kind of work. Anita's working on mentoring and new ham development, trying to get hams licensed, trying to help them figure out how to get on the air and get active. And I've just appointed my 4th assistant director, Dan Norman, who has a good bit of experience building youth-oriented amateur radio clubs. He's going to be trying to do work to get schools and young people specifically involved in amateur radio. So those are the 4 initial things that the ADs are going to do. The other thing we talked a lot about is communications, and I want to just talk a little bit about how we're approaching that. I believe that the #1 reason that people have negative perceptions of the ARRL comes back to at least one common issue, and that is that we do a lousy job telling you what's going on, and more importantly, we don't do a good enough job listening to you and trying to act on your concerns. Okay? And I am 100% committed to changing that, even if it means I'm not standing here in 3 years. Okay? It's important. So how are we going to do that? Well, there's 2 parts. First of all, cabinet meetings. Historically, the directors who've had cabinet meetings have them around the board meeting, and they kind of make them about the board meeting and nothing else. I think that's a huge wasted opportunity to bring all the section managers, key field staff people, club presidents, and a lot of folks who are doing good work in the division together, and only talk about what's going to go on with a bunch of directors at a board meeting in Newington. That's a huge missed opportunity. So what are we doing? We're going to have 4 of those a year, even though there are only 2 board meetings. We're going to bring headquarters people, and I've already started doing this, to talk about what they're doing in front of that group and get some direct input from some of the leaders that run kind of amateur radio processes here in New England. And we're going to have a pretty active follow-up process to make sure that the issues that get taken there get something done about them. Secondly, it's nice if you're a club president or the section manager on the field staff, but the last time I checked, there are about 9,000 members in our division, and most of them don't hold any badges with colors on, other than the ones from their clubs. So the most important thing we're doing is the kind of stuff we're doing right here, which is getting together with all of you, explaining what's going on, and listening to your concerns. Now, sometimes it's hard to get to enough ham fests to really do this well. So in addition to this kind of work, I've started having what are called town hall meetings. We had the first one last Wednesday. We had 255 people registered, 211 showed up, and I think we spent probably about 2 hours going through some of the material here and then answering, I think, 75 questions that were live on that town hall. It's recorded, so if anybody has transparency concerns, go watch the recording. I'm on record, including for the action items that we took, the things we said we would do. Okay? And we're going to continue to do those, I think probably 3 times a year is going to be about the right clock. And that's an opportunity for everybody in the division to basically get us to stand up and be accountable. All right? And then lastly, club meetings. I think that clubs are really, really important. For those of you who know me, I built kind of my background in amateur radio service through clubs, club work. Myself, Phil, our vice director, and every one of our assistant directors is committed to attending at least 6 club meetings a quarter, which means that there's something like, let's see, 6 times 5, 30 times 4, about 120 club meetings that we will be attending each year. And that's again an opportunity for us to be in front of all of you, understand what's really going on, and be there to take issues and take feedback and be accountable. All right. And then lastly, you can see I'm starting to build an agenda of Ham Fest. If you all have a Ham Fest and you want us to come out, we'll be there. All right, communications. Phil, I think given the setup in the room, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and cover this and move through it. But this is really Phil Temple's initiative. Phil, by the way, if you don't know, K9HI is our vice director. And I must say that I am extremely fortunate to have Phil working with me. He is very, very good at all manner of this stuff. He's got tremendous experience in the field staff organization. He knows everybody in the division, and he's about the most accountable and hardworking ARRL volunteer that I know.
We have him.
You got him? All right. Hey, Phil. Good. We can see you here. You're spotlighted. So a couple things that you can do to help us with our communications. Phil maintains on behalf of the division an excellent website. It's NEDIV, New England Division, November Echo Delta India Victor .arrl.org. And literally there's not a day that goes by that we don't post some useful piece of information, news article, link to protest forest service proposals, whatever it is on that site. And we'd encourage you to subscribe and get those updates. Secondly, if you go onto the ARRL website, under your profile, there is a division and section mailing list option. Now, we're going to be pretty careful on how we use those lists because I know folks don't particularly appreciate getting a pile of emails, but we'd like to ask everybody, if you're not subscribed to those emails, to get on them. So how do we use those? When New Hampshire 1644 came out and we had a day's notice to get hams to comment for the hearing, we used that list to help people know how to do it. What did they do? Over 300 comments were filed in a day. So that's going to be a key mechanism we're going to use for communications on things that we know are broad interest. When we do a town hall meeting, the information on how to get involved in that will go out on that list. Okay? When the comment period opens for the Forest Service proposal on Tuesday, I plan to drop an email telling you how you can go in and comment. So please, if you're not already subscribed to the division list, go in your profile and try and do that. And then lastly, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions here. Some of you remember that during the campaign, I talked about something called a 100-day plan, and I said I would be accountable for executing that plan, okay? So here's my report card, all right? So the first element, reach out to board members and senior ARRL leadership to create common ground for action. I spoke with every director, the CEO, the whole front row, VPs and so on, and actually all of David Minster's report by the end of last year before I ever took office. And as a result of that, I was able to get involved in the first board meeting and have a lot more impact and get involved in activities like these club grant programs and some of the other stuff I'm talking about here. Whereas had I not done that, I would have wasted at least 6 months. So that's done, and it was been pretty successful. Secondly, we talked a lot about communications, and I think you can see what we're doing there. Town hall meetings, 4 board meetings. These sessions are all about my commitment to make communications really work in the division. We said we'd appoint 4 assistant directors. As of late this week, all 4 are in place. Okay, and they're already 2 of the 4 have already held first meetings. The other 2 will probably do that within the next 30 days to get the processes going. And lastly, and this I think is really important, mentoring and a lot of the programs in amateur radio really are built on top of the backbone of amateur radio clubs and groups that operate like clubs. And I can think of nothing that's more important than to be engaged with people in club meetings and activities and be listening to what they're doing, trying to take good ideas and help them publicize them so more people can benefit, and particularly as a key place to get feedback. And this is why I'm requiring all of the folks on my team, the assistant directors, Phil and I as well, to attend at least 6 club meetings every single quarter. So hopefully you all won't get tired of seeing us. You're going to see a heck of a lot of us, I think. So anyway, that's where we are. The 100-day plan was complete in 60 days. So I guess I'm going to have to come up with a 200-day plan. All right, that's really all I had for prepared material. How about some more questions, comments, concerns, anything at all?
You could stop sharing if you're not going to.
Oh yeah, sure, thanks. Thanks for the suggestion. By the way, real quickly, while you're thinking, just a few people to introduce. Phil Temples, our director, K9HI, who has been an integral part of a lot of the work, including the communication stuff, as well as helping me set policy. Corey Gold, KU1U, Assistant Director for Emergency Communications and Public Service. Give us a wave, Corey. There he is. Rob Lyden, K1UI, who's our Assistant Director for Spectrum Protection. He's the gentleman who's working along other things, the RFI project. And Anita, AD1QB, our Assistant Director for Newham Development and Mentoring. Dan Norman just took the job on Thursday. So we're giving him one more weekend of grace before we get him into the fray, but that'll be our 4th Assistant Director. All right, any questions or comments, feedback? If you all want, we can bring that band plan proposal up for the tech license and take a quick look at that. You guys want to do that? All right, Phil, if you want to bring that up, and hopefully Mitch can give you a share.
Yeah, I'll need sharing permission first.
Yeah, thanks.
So while he's doing that, any other questions or comments that I can answer? Anything at all? Okay. And how about online? Anybody have anything online while Phil is doing what he's doing? All right, Phil, do you want to sum this up just real briefly of what's in this proposal? I don't think we can really read the fine print, so maybe if you could just kind of hit the high points, that'd be great.
Let me see if I can make it larger here. One moment. Is that better?
I doubt anybody other than online can read it, but so why don't you just summarize kind of what's in here real briefly?
Sure. ARRL has asked the FCC to expand HF privileges for technician licensees, limited phone privileges on 75, 40, and 15, plus RTTY in digital mode. Frequencies are 3.9 to 4.0 megahertz, 7.225 to 7.3 megahertz, 21.35 to 21.45 megahertz, plus Ridian digital privileges in current technician allocations on 80, 40, 15, and 10. So that's the highlight.
So that's basically what we're trying to get done through the FCC. Now, I did mention I thought this was really important. Let me give you a little bit of data. As I mentioned, I've been pretty heavily involved along with Anita in licensing in the division. We teach 7 amateur radio classes, full 2- and 3-day classes for Tech General and Extra twice a year. We track the history of folks pretty carefully, and what we found after several years of doing this and licensing about 200 people to tech, that less than 25% of them would be on the air a year later. And the group that I'm involved with does a lot of mentoring. So I thought, man, we must really be doing something wrong. So I talked with Gordon West, some of the people in the league, said, no, you guys are doing great. We think the real number is more like 15%. So we started talking to these people to try to find out why are they not getting on the air. You know, why they've done all this work to get a license, why after a year aren't you active? 2 things we heard. One is that there's nobody out there who will help me figure out how to use my license, mentoring. And it's one of the reasons that we have an assistant director that's in charge of mentoring. We're trying to attack that problem. And we need all of you to get involved in that mentoring work and help those people get active on the air to get them to use their license. Number 2 reason, I got on my local repeater with my HT and nobody would talk to me. Or worse yet, they kind of treated me like I shouldn't be there. And by the way, maybe the people in the local repeater were friendly, but it just wasn't that active. Now the first thing comes back to being a welcoming hobby and mentoring again. The second part is about making amateur radio be more of an experience than just the local repeater. It's not to say that that's not fun and important, has a huge role in emergency communications. We all do that. But if that's all the new ham can do, they tend to lose interest very, very quickly. And what this proposal that Phil showed you is about is trying to attack that second problem. And quite frankly, all the great work, and I know many of you are involved in this, that you do in licensing, is not going to have the impact that it could or needs to unless we attack these other issues and actually get people active and on the air and building stations. Other questions or comments? Anything at all? How about online? I can tell that lunch is approaching. Anything at all? Any concerns?
Do they know how to unmute themselves?
Folks, yeah, good point. Thanks for bringing that up. If you're not real accomplished with Zoom, at the bottom of the Zoom window there's a thing that looks like a microphone, and you should be able to click on that if you want to ask a question. Unmute yourself so we can hear you. Any questions or comments, feedback, anything at all? Yeah, in the back.
Yeah, so I just got licensed. Thanks.
What's your call sign, by the way? I don't mean to put you on the spot. You probably haven't used it enough to remember yet. So what's your question?
Yeah, so I keep asking the same question, which is, I'm brand new. What should I get as my first radio? What should I get as my first antenna? And the answer I always get is the same answer that, frankly, I've been to a lot of tech conferences, and you ask, well, how should I approach this problem? And the answer is always, it depends. And that's the most frustrating answer for somebody that's trying to get started. So I know that it depends, right? It depends on what you want, what bands you want to be on, all this other stuff. But as a starting person, we don't know that. We have no idea what bands we want to be on because we don't even know what bands are available, really, or why I would want.
Or what you can do if you get on one of them, right?
Right. So I've memorized the frequencies in order to get my license, but I have no idea which ones are popular, what I can do on them, things like that. You guys know that. Right. So what I would recommend or actually request as somebody that's coming into it for the first time, come up with an onboarding plan for new hams that says, okay, eventually you're going to want to do all this other stuff, but here's a plan to get you online, get you equipment that will work, and that will at least get you on the air and working in it, and then you can expand and you can have sort of like a little program where say, okay, once you've done this, now you can go on and do this, and here's the equipment that you need for that. And then having some materials for local clubs to be able to approach somebody and say, okay, here's your packet. We'll come to your house and help you figure out what you
can do, how to put an antenna up, get a station built,
all that stuff. To me, that's because I'm pretty persistent. So I'm pretty persistent. So I'm going to keep going until I figure it out. But there's a lot of people that would just
like 75%. Are a lot of people. Anita, do you want to respond to some of that with some of the things you're thinking about doing? Anita would be the assistant director, and then I'll add on based on. But let me give you the mic, Anita. And you're on mute, by the way.
Okay, so our club has a program called Ham Boot Camp, and it does a lot of what you're talking about. We have sections, it's basically a day of an introduction. How do I build a station with specific recommendations of equipment and things like that. The group that I'm heading up, I want to have discussions, amongst other, this is one example. There are a few clubs that do this really well. I want to bring them together, have them, spread their knowledge and tell their give their suggestions to other clubs, so that we have more clubs that are able to help their members, help new hams to get on the air.
Yep, and by the way, clubs are the key to this. The other thing we're looking at doing is, as Anita pointed out, there are clubs out there that have mentoring programs. If your club has one, we're going to put together a web page on our division website where we can feature the clubs in the division who do mentoring work of the type you're looking for, so that new hams like yourself can find clubs that are willing to spend time with you and help you, because that's really what this is about. That's a great question. And I hope 3 years from now, when you're an experienced ham, you'll be standing up here encouraging the room to do the kinds of things that benefited you. That's the goal here. Other questions or comments? Anything at all, including online? Thanks, Anita,
Can I
by the
make
way.
a couple of comments?
Yep. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments.
Sure, go ahead.
I have that, you get concerned. because-
Talking to the mic.
You get concerned because of the, it depends, but that's exactly what it does. What class of license do you have?
I just got my general now.
Okay, that's a good answer, because you're prepared then to go somewhere. With a technician, you kind of box yourself in a little bit limited as to what you can do. Now, I can put in perspective, in the old days, most of us got into ham radio because we had a shortwave receiver, and we listened to all the stuff going on. We got familiarized ourselves with the bands. We pretty quickly developed a sense of what bands were open, what frequency, where they would cover, who you were hearing, how far you could go, and so forth. And that's what attracted to us, all those guys talking, and we'd like to get out there and be able to talk to them too. Now, I don't know, I'd be curious, what got you interested in ham radio in the first place?
Been interested for a long time, never actually followed through. That was it.
You know, well, I would suggest that everybody give themselves a decent quality shortwave radio that allows them to tune all the HF bands and the other stuff in between and see what's out there, because then you really familiarize yourself, and a lot of your questions that you have right now would have you sort of answered them yourself. That's the way, you know. Whereas I understand the old days are not like today, but that's like 2 cents worth. And by the way, 62 years worth of ham radio, so. Where do you live?
Yeah, where's home?
Arlington, Vermont.
Okay.
Way down the southern end of the state.
Got it. So, by the way, excellent example of mentoring here. I want to compliment you on what you just did, because you asked the most important question first, which is what got you interested in amateur radio, and what are you interested in doing? That's really, really important to do good mentoring. It's also important, field day should be most and foremost about mentoring. When you know, Marty was mentioning some of the field days that he does with us in New Hampshire. If you come out and set up a station at field day, we give you first shot at whatever you want to do. If you want to be on 20-meter sideband on the run station at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, we'll give that to you and we'll sit somebody down with you to make you successful. Okay? Why do we do that? That's how you're going to find out what you want to do. We have a lot of different equipment there, a lot of different operating activities, a ton of people on the air. It is a wonderful opportunity to introduce a new ham of what the potential for amateur radio is, station building, antennas, all the things that go into it. So one thing that everybody can do is make your field day about memory. And what you will find is that, how do they say that youth and enthusiasm will make up for old age and treachery? Those young people, they're going to operate all night. They'll be on that radio at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to practice what they did because they've never done it before. And you know, the other good thing about doing that, when you do that, no matter how long you've been in amateur radio, when you see someone make their first contacts, it'll be just like when you made your first one too. And to me, that's the whole case for the experienced ham doing mentoring. Because you can have that same experience that you had the first time with someone else, and believe me, it's really special. Thank you very much. Other comments or questions?
There's a comment on the screen that's kind of funny.
Yep, sorry, go ahead, what's the comment?
Oh, you gotta click on it, it went away.
Okay, maybe you can help me with that, Mitch.
I can reiterate what my comment was if you want. It's
Go
Corey.
ahead, Corey.
So just going back to the newer ham, he was asking the question about what do I get for a first radio, and I always say it depends. I'm in that group that say it depends, but I've never been to Vermont, but I just did a quick search. You know, I look for what's popular in your area, right? We're in a format war. It's Betamax versus VHS times 10 right now. So in Vermont, it looks like there's a lot of DMR activity, which is one of the digital modes. So if I were you, I would strike a conversation while you're there with people about DMR. it sounds like that's where you could probably maximize getting a conversation with other people. And I also joke that, even though we're in these format wars, every radio is interoperable because we have analog on them. So you can still get on analog repeaters. So my suggestion, chat with people, see what their recommendations are about a DMR radio, and that can be a place to start.
All right, thank you, Corey. Folks, I'm getting the hook. I want to thank you all for coming out and listening. And AB10C at ARRL.org, K9HI at ARRL.org, KU1U at ARRL.org, AB1QB at ARRL1.org, K1UI at ARRL1.org, N0HF at ARRL.org.
I think the assistant directors have the any div before them.
Well, all right, you're right. So it'll be anydiv.arl.org. But take some time, get involved with us and help us. We will make you and your programs and your work much more effective by publicizing it and by making the league pay attention to what you're doing. And I've said this many times, I don't know how much I can change the ARL for the better. I'm going to try like hell. But one thing I'm damn sure I can do is I can make New England better in the next 3 years. I'm going to do that. And I need your help to do it. Thank you.